Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are walking through one of the most haunting cases, really defined by a single terrifying audio clip, the vanishing of Brandon Lee Lawson.
Sound cue. Brief, distorted, chilling audio clip. The guy's chasing an audible to the woods. Please hurry.
Yeah, that sound, even just a snippet, it's chilling.
It absolutely is. And that audio, as, distorted as it is, that's really what kept this case churning in the public consciousness for, over a decade now.
It's so panicked, isn't it? So fragmented.
Exactly. It contains just enough raw emotion, enough sort of potential threat to sound like someone is genuinely running for their life.
And it includes those phrases, the ones everyone argues about, like, I ran into them, or I need the cops. Those bits are just fuel for the fire.
They really are. And it sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it, for the night of August 8, 2013.
Yeah, let's picture it. We're talking about a dark, pretty isolated stretch of U.S. Route 277 near Bronte, Texas.
Right. And what we know starts with an abandoned truck and a 26-year-old father, Brandon Lawson, making this desperate, almost incoherent 911 call.
A call that seemed to pit him against some kind of unseen threat right in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm. And for nearly a decade, this case was really the definition of a cold missing person case, a puzzle defined almost entirely by confusion, by these conflicting interpretations of that audio.
But now, things have changed. His remains have been positively identified.
Which shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? We're not asking where Brandon is anymore.
No. Now we have to urgently unpack what truly happened in those final moments. Was that panic in his voice justified? Was it really an external threat? Foul play?
Or was this a tragic accident, maybe fueled by paranoia, disorientation?
Yeah.
Something else entirely.
We've found maybe the final chapter of his physical journey, but the actual story, the narrative of how he died, that feels wide open still.
Okay, so let's unpack this timeline then, because the window of time where Brandon was, seemingly conscious and maybe in control of his actions, it seems terrifyingly small. Less than 2 hours, really.
Right. It kicks off just before midnight, August 8th. Brandon leaves his home in San Angelo. There'd been an argument with his girlfriend, desolate.
Yeah, and the plan, it seems, was pretty standard after a fight, right? Drive north, head to his father's place in Crowley, Texas. Kind of a refuge.
But the trip, it hits a snag almost immediately.
It does. And it's a scenario that, it seems to pop up depressingly often in these kinds of cases. An argument, a sudden decision to leave.
And then, bam, mechanical failure. He runs out of gas.
On U.S. Route 277, south of Bronte. And we need to stress, this area is known for being rugged, really dark, remote.
Yeah, this isn't like pulling over on a suburban street. This is open Texas brushland we're talking about. Pitch black.
Which brings us to that first critical call. This is around 12:30 a.m. Now, this isn't the famous 911 call yet.
No, this is Brandon calling his brother, Kyle Lawson, asking for help. Gas, specifically.
But this call, it's immediately loaded with alarm and suspicion, really.
How so?
Brandon tells Kyle, and the record shows he used some pretty heated language, that 3 people are chasing me out of town, or something very close to that.
Wow. Okay, so right from the jump, there's this element of being pursued.
Exactly. And the immediacy of this perceived threat is startling. I mean, he'd just run out of gas. Where did these 3 people come from? And this moment, this very first interaction with Kyle, it becomes foundational for how the investigation and maybe even the family initially saw the whole situation.
Why is that?
Because Kyle's immediate and frankly devastating concern was that Brandon might be experiencing an episode of paranoia.
Ah.
We know from family statements later on that Brandon had a history of substance abuse. Specifically, methamphetamine use was mentioned.
Right.
And Kyle's gut reaction hearing that panicked claim about being chased, it was to suspect a drug-induced paranoid episode.
Okay, I see. So that piece of insight coming from his own brother.
It immediately complicated everything. How do you interpret Brandon's behavior now? Is he truly fleeing a real external threat? Or is he panicking over something internal, something only he can perceive?
That distinction, internal versus external.
Yeah.
That feels like the core of the whole debate, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's fueled primarily by what happens next. The 911 call itself. That comes about 20 minutes later, around 12:50 a.m.
And this is where it shifts from just needing gas to a full-blown emergency.
Precisely. The 911 call is the heart of this mystery. And its incoherence is perhaps its most defining and maybe damning characteristic.
What exactly does he say? I mean, beyond the famous bits.
Well, the contents are fragmented, almost terrifyingly difficult to decipher clearly. He does manage to state some basics, things like, yes, I'm in the middle of a field and my truck ran out of gas. Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
But then the narrative just shifts, violently almost. He says, there's one car here. Then the guy's chasing inaudible to the woods. Please hurry.
Wow. So you got the mundane problem, no gas, smashed right up against this claim of being chased, hiding in a field.
Exactly. It paints this picture of just frantic, disorganized flight, clearly driven by extreme distress.
And it's important to remember the nature of that distress, right? Law enforcement, people who've tried to transcribe this call over the years.
Mm-hmm. They've consistently struggled. There's ambient noise, maybe wind, maybe something else. There's the speed Brandon's talking at, the panic.
And the apparent lack of clear, coherent information about who might be chasing him or why.
Right. It was enough to trigger a response, obviously, but maybe not enough to locate him quickly or understand the true nature of the emergency.
Which leads us to the timing of the last known contact.
Yes. So Kyle, his brother, and a sheriff's deputy managed to get to the abandoned truck around 1:10 a.m.
Okay, so that's only about 40 minutes after that first call to Kyle for gas.
and just 20 minutes after the 911 call went out.
But Brandon's already gone from the truck area.
He's gone from the immediate vicinity, yes. He's already fled into the surrounding darkness, into that brush.
And they are so close.
Huh?
But it's completely dark, confusing.
Totally. And while Kyle is actually on the phone with Brandon right there from the roadside, Brandon says something like, "I can see you. I'm right here."
No way.
Yeah. The deputy uses his flashlight, sweeps the area. Kyle's looking around. But in that darkness, in that dense mesquite brush, neither of them can spot him.
Just yards away, potentially.
Could be hundreds of yards, could be closer, but completely separated by the environment and the night. It's incredibly difficult terrain to see into, even with a light.
And this is where that suspicion Kyle had about the possible substance use, the paranoia, it tragically affects the outcome.
It seems so. The records, the accounts tell us Kyle leaves the gas can he brought near the truck and then drives away.
He leaves. Why?
Because based on everything, the earlier call, the 911 incoherence, maybe Brandon's history, Kyle believed Brandon was intentionally hiding from the deputy.
Because Brandon had an active, outstanding arrest warrant at the time.
Exactly. Kyle assumed Brandon was simply avoiding law enforcement, ducking the deputy because of the warrant. Not that he was genuinely trapped or injured or in some kind of existential danger.
That's heartbreaking. A terrible judgment call, but you can almost see the logic under pressure.
It's an understandable human judgment, perhaps, given the circumstances as Kyle perceived them, but devastating in hindsight. If they had immediately launched a search right then and there.
Instead of treating it like, okay, abandoned vehicle, guy with a warrant probably laying low nearby.
Right. If they treated it as a critical emergency search from minute one, the outcome might have been entirely different. We just don't know.
And the truck itself. Did it offer any clues?
Few immediate clues suggesting foul play, apparently. It was parked kind of haphazardly off the road, but otherwise just abandoned.
Doors unlocked.
Doors unlocked,
Yeah.
Suggests a rapid exit, maybe. But crucially, his keys and his cell phone were gone.
He took them with him.
He took his only lifeline, his phone, with him into that dark, rugged territory.
And then nothing. For almost a decade.
The decade of silence. Despite that frantic audio, despite the obvious mystery, extensive searches, both official and unofficial, over nearly 10 years turned up absolutely nothing.
Just vanished. Theories must have been flying, foul play, got lost, maybe something about the police response.
All of the above. Foul play was huge, obviously. Disorientation due to substances or just the environment.
Yeah.
And big questions about potential law enforcement miscommunication or maybe the thoroughness of the initial searches.
And the search area itself sounds like a nightmare.
Oh, it was a huge hurdle. This isn't like flat, open farmland where you can easily do a grid search.
No, it's that thick Texas brushland you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mesquite, heavy undergrowth.
Exactly. Rugged terrain. Lots of it is private property, fenced-off hunting leases. Searches were complicated by needing landowner permission, dealing with those fences, and just the sheer scale of the wilderness around that highway.
The terrain was incredibly unforgiving. Makes sense that a traditional search would be tough.
Virtually impossible without massive resources, which, frankly, were likely never fully allocated, maybe partly because of how the case was initially framed, potentially substance-related, guy avoiding a warrant.
Until February 2022, things finally start to change.
They do. The first undeniable break comes from a private search team. These groups often get involved in cold cases, operating independently.
What'd they find?
They located clothing. Critically, clothing that matched the description of what Brandon was last seen wearing that night.
Wow. Okay, so that pins down a location, more or less.
A much more specific location, yes. It was a critical step. Turns it from a complete vanishing into a confirmed incident area, miles from the truck, but still in that general direction he might have fled.
And that discovery, it must have re-energized the official investigation.
It did. Following that clothing find, the Texas Rangers got re-engaged. They conducted a new, thorough search around that area, and they found partial human remains, approximately 400 yards, maybe a bit more, from where the clothing was located.
400 yards, so not right next to it, but close.
Relatively close, yeah. And this location was deep inside a private hunting property, quite a ways from the highway itself, confirming he had indeed fled quite significantly into the open country.
And the identification. That took a while too, right?
It did. The final painful piece of closure on that front arrived almost 2 years later. We're talking December 2024.
Why so long?
Well, after nearly 3 years of testing, it really speaks to the likely degradation of the samples after being out in the elements for 9 years. DNA testing on aged remains can be complex.
But eventually.
Eventually, the DNA confirmation came through. The remains belonged to Brandon Lawson.
So closure, at least about where he ended up.
Definitive closure regarding his location, yes. He died relatively close to where he vanished. He wasn't taken hundreds of miles away.
But, and this is the big but, isn't it?
This is the crux of our current discussion, yeah. It does not provide closure on the cause of death. How did he die? That question remains.
Right. So the fact that we now have physical confirmation, we know where Brandon's journey ended, it doesn't actually stop the debate about that 911 audio, does it?
Not at all. If anything, it might intensify it for some. That audio is still the ghost in the machine here.
It's just so ambiguous, faint, distorted, recorded probably over a weak cell signal in a rural spot.
Exactly. Which is why trying to get a definitive transcript, analyzing it forensically, it remains incredibly difficult, even with better tech today.
And that ambiguity means everyone can kind of hear what they want to hear or what fits their theory.
Precisely. It gives every listener room to project their own ideas onto those sounds, those silences.
And the competing interpretations, they're really built on the background noise, things that might not even be there.
That's what's so insightful, or maybe frustrating. Online communities especially have focused so heavily on specific possible sounds in the background. Things that could just be artifacts of the recording, static, wind, or could be actual event cues.
Like what specifically?
Well, two main things keep coming up. One, the suggestion, and it's faint, of a distant sound that could be interpreted as a gunshot happening somewhere mid-call.
A gunshot. Okay, that's obviously huge if true.
Huge if true, but incredibly difficult to confirm from the audio quality. And two, that faint whispery sound. Some are convinced it's "help me." Others think it sounds more like "I ran into them."
And others think it could just be breathing, panic sounds.
Exactly. Could be heavy breathing, could be noise on the line, could be misinterpreted words. The ambiguity is total.
But if you believe you hear a gunshot or a clear "help me,"
then it immediately strengthens that external threat theory, right? The idea that he wasn't just paranoid.
Yeah. It makes the belief that he stumbled onto someone, dangerous drug traffickers, maybe just territorial property owners, who knows, and had to flee for his life. It makes that feel much more real.
Mm-hmm. The incredibly distorted nature of the audio ensures that theory stays alive. It's impossible to definitively rule out based only on the sound, even now that we know where he was found.
It's amazing how sound, or what we think we hear, can sometimes overshadow the physical evidence, or lack thereof.
It highlights the power of suggestion, especially when dealing with something so emotionally charged. The lack of audio clarity means the most dramatic possibility, chased, attacked, maybe even killed by others, remains plausible in the public imagination.
So let's dig into those competing theories then. Starting with that one, the one fueled by the audio panic. Theory A, external threat, foul play.
Right. This theory hinges almost entirely on taking Brandon's words somewhat literally. I ran into them. The claim of being chased, maybe by those 3 people he mentioned to Kyle.
So the idea is he genuinely stumbled upon something bad out there on that dark highway.
That's the core of it. Maybe suspicious individuals, maybe illegal activity already in progress, drug deal, poaching, something he wasn't meant to see.
And his panic flight into the brush wasn't paranoia, it was a genuine escape attempt.
Yes. A rational response in that view to a very real threat.
And that would explain the urgency in the 911 call, the claims of pursuit.
Mm-hmm. And the fact he ditched the truck so quickly, without grabbing essentials perhaps, suggests he felt an immediate need to get away, to hide, fearing discovery or capture by these unknown people, makes a certain kind of narrative sense.
Okay. But then you have theory B, the one that investigators, maybe even forensic experts, often lean towards, especially considering the family's initial concerns.
Theory B, substance-induced paranoia leading ultimately to accidental death.
This goes back to Kyle's first reaction and the later confirmation about Brandon's recent methamphetamine use.
Exactly. And from a medical or psychological perspective, methamphetamine is a powerful stimulant. It's well documented that it can, and often does, induce acute paranoid psychosis, meaning users can genuinely believe they are being followed, tracked, targeted by unseen forces or people. It triggers an intense, often delusional fight or flight response.
So this theory suggests Brandon wasn't running from real people.
He was potentially suffering a massive paranoid delusional episode. In that state, he might perceive threats that aren't there or wildly exaggerate minor stimuli. So he flees frantically into the dark, rugged brushland.
Running away from phantoms, essentially.
Possibly, not necessarily from a real physical pursuer.
And once he's out there, in that state, in that terrain,
things could go wrong very quickly. He's in challenging terrain, disoriented, likely hyperthermic overheating from the exertion, the adrenaline, potentially the drug itself. Add absolute darkness, the harsh Texas summer conditions could be lethal. He could have succumbed to exposure, dehydration, maybe just an injury from falling while running blindly through the brush. A tragic misadventure, ultimately stemming from a compromised mental state.
And the location where the remains were found.
Yeah.
Near a fence line, deep into private property. Does that fit this theory?
It's highly consistent, yeah. It suggests potential exhaustion or disorientation. Maybe he reached a barrier, like a fence, couldn't get over it, and collapsed.
That location, 400 yards from the clothing, quite a way into that property. It does emphasize a sort of disoriented flight, doesn't it?
It does. It wasn't like he just collapsed right by the road. It suggests a sustained, panicked effort to get away, to run deeper into the wilderness, possibly away from something that was entirely internal.
This case, maybe more than many others, has become such a touchstone for internet sleuthing, hasn't it? The cultural impact.
Oh, absolutely. For years, the official investigation seemed stalled, lack of leads, maybe resources shifted elsewhere. But the online community, they kept this case boiling hot.
It really highlights the power, sometimes maybe the relentless power, of crowdsourced investigation. Digital sleuthing.
Definitely. You look at Reddit forums dedicated to Brandon Lawson, YouTube channels breaking down the case. These communities dissected that 911 call for years. They treated the audio like it was the Rosetta Stone, the ultimate solvable piece of evidence.
And they weren't just listening, they were doing actual analysis.
Yeah, some really specialized stuff. You have people doing waveform analyses, trying to visually spot energy spikes that might be a gunshot. Linguistic breakdowns, analyzing his pitch, his cadence, trying to gauge the authenticity of the panic.
And those audio remixes.
Right. Applying heavy EQ, noise reduction filters, all these attempts to clarify those specific inaudible, ambiguous parts of the call. The parts that official transcripts often just marked as inaudible.
They were basically looking for the needle in the digital haystack, believing maybe citizen tech could uncover what the initial police analysis missed or couldn't clarify.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how that debate continues, even after the DNA confirmation. The remains being found didn't really stop it.
These post-discovery debates, they're still going strong.
Very much so, and still highly charged. The online community is asking, does finding his skeletal remains miles away somehow contradict the sheer terror you hear on that tape? If he just got lost and succumbed to exposure, Why did he sound so panicked, so convinced he was being chased?
They want the audio to hold the key to how he died, not just that he died out there.
Precisely. There's this persistent desire for the audio itself to yield the definitive answer specifically, an answer involving foul play even when the physical evidence, the skeletal remains, might not offer a clear forensic smoking gun for homicide. The mystery of the sound, the words, it seems almost more powerful for many than the physical reality of the remains' location.
So, when we step back and analyze this, now that we have the confirmation from the remains, we've really shifted, haven't we, from a missing person case
to an unsolved death investigation. That's the fundamental shift.
Okay, so what does the evidence, the remains specifically, actually confirm?
Well, what it confirms is straightforward and profoundly tragic in its own way. Brandon did flee his truck. He did run into that open land, and he died relatively close, within a few miles, maybe less, to where his vehicle was abandoned.
So he wasn't, abducted and taken somewhere else?
Doesn't appear so. The location suggests he died rapidly, relatively near the site where his panic began.
But what the evidence doesn't confirm, that's the huge lingering question mark, right? The how and why.
Exactly. And we have to talk about the forensic limitations here. After 9 years out in the open, on rugged Texas land exposed to heat, rain, animals.
The remains were skeletal, partial.
Right. And that severely impacts what forensics can tell us. Taphonomy, the whole process of decomposition, environmental effects, scavenger activity, it erases so much.
There were things like soft tissue injuries, defensive wounds, maybe signs of asphyxiation, all gone.
Long gone. What the forensic team is primarily looking for on skeletal remains is gross trauma. Things like a bullet hole or nick in a bone, significant blunt force fractures that haven't healed.
And finding that, especially if the remains aren't complete or perfectly preserved, that's tough.
Very difficult. And the official statements reflect this. They've said that due to the skeletal nature of the remains, the exact cause of death is currently unclear to authorities.
Which leads the official classification. Hanging, homicide, accidental, natural causes, undetermined.
Pretty much wide open. The absence of clear forensic evidence of foul play doesn't rule it out entirely, of course. But it forces investigators to rely much more heavily on circumstantial evidence, maybe toxicology if anything was preserved, which itself is often inconclusive after so long.
So that forensic difficulty, it prevents that definitive closure everyone wants, the what happened answer.
It really does, which circles back to why the audio remains so potent.
Let's talk about that idea of a tragic perfect storm. It feels like, whether the initial threat was real or imagined, so many things had to go wrong for this to end so fatally.
It really does seem like a chain reaction, a combination of human factors, maybe chemical impairment, and the physical environment creating these conditions where a fatal outcome became almost likely.
Okay, let's break down those components. First, miscommunication. That seems huge here.
Absolutely. Kyle's assumption, understandable, maybe, but wrong, that Brandon was just hiding from that warrant. That led him to leave the scene.
Removing the immediate chance for help.
Right. And maybe the 911 dispatcher's difficulty in figuring out what was really happening from that incoherent call. Was it domestic, an accident, a real chase? That could have affected the priority level of the initial response. Lost time.
Precious time, when Brandon was already out in the brush.
Then you have the terrain factor. We've touched on it, but it's critical.
That Texas brushland near Bronte. Not easy ground.
Not at all. Dense mesquite, uneven footing, fences everywhere for private hunting leases. Running through that in pitch blackness, especially if you're panicked or disoriented, you're going to fall. You get injured easily.
Even a twisted ankle out there could be disastrous.
Could turn a potential rescue scenario into an almost impossible search within minutes,
And finally, the substance use factor, if that was involved.
As discussed, if Brandon was under the influence of methamphetamine, his cognitive function would likely be severely impaired. Increased paranoia, yes, but also increased heart rate, physical exertion, faster exhaustion.
So he'd be running flat out.
At maximal physical capacity, potentially, away from a threat that might be internally generated, leading to rapid fatigue, collapse, in an area where finding him would be incredibly difficult.
So the substance wouldn't necessarily be the direct cause of death, like an overdose.
Not necessarily, but it could create the psychological and physical conditions, the panic, The flight, the exhaustion, the disorientation that made his death almost inevitable once he fled the relative safety of the roadside.
And the role of the time in all this.
Yeah.
This feels crucial.
It really is. That gap between the last contact, 1:10 a.m., when Kyle was on the phone but couldn't see him, and the moment anyone realized, okay, this isn't just him hiding, this is serious, that gap was too long.
Even if he hadn't been impaired, running off into that environment at night is inherently dangerous.
Absolutely. And if he was delusional, tragically, he might have been actively running away from the very people, Kyle and the deputy who are right there, potentially able to help him.
Which brings us to that final point. Closure versus answers.
Yeah. The family. They finally received that profound, essential relief of knowing where Brandon is. The DNA match provides that. It's huge.
Immense emotional closure, you'd imagine. They can finally bring him home, grieve properly.
Definitely. But the how and why of his death, that remains an open wound for them and for the public following the case.
We know where, but not the exact mechanism, not the definitive nature of that threat he perceived.
And without clear forensic proof of trauma, those competing theories, foul play versus accidental death fueled by paranoia, they're just going to continue to circulate. It keeps the case perpetually active, at least in the online sphere.
The broader implication here, it really highlights both sides of the internet investigation coin, doesn't it?
It really does. Power and pitfalls. These online communities absolutely kept Brandon's memory alive, kept the pressure on, raised funds, organized searches when official interest perhaps waned. That's powerful.
But the pitfall.
The ultimate truth, the resolution, still rests on official evidence. And in this case, that evidence was fundamentally inconclusive from the get-go. That faint, distorted audio and the resulting lack of immediate focused resources based on that ambiguity. The internet can't magically clarify evidence that isn't clear to begin with.
It makes you wonder about the future, though. Technology.
You have to, right? Think about future tech. What if, 10 years from now, AI-enhanced audio analysis could strip away all that distortion? Could it definitively say, yes, that was a gunshot, or no, that whisper was just breathing?
Modern spectral analysis, AI, noise reduction. It's getting better all the time.
It's advancing incredibly fast. It might bring clarity to similar cold case calls in the future, provide certainty where human ears and basic filters fail. The next ambiguous 911 call might not stay ambiguous for a decade.
Let's hope so. But for Brandon Lawson, we're left with the evidence we have now.
Yeah, a frantic flight into the dark, that unforgiving brushland, and remains found years later telling us where he ended his journey, but not the full story of his final moments.
It's just such a powerful illustration of how quickly things can turn tragic. Internal struggles meeting harsh external realities, compounded by misunderstandings.
Confusion, maybe courage in facing whatever he perceived, and ultimately, that haunting silence.
Brandon's story is one of confusion, courage, and the haunting silence of an open Texas night.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we explore the strange case of Aileen Conway, a fiery car crash in Oklahoma that looked like suicide, until the evidence suggested something far darker.